one thing that really frustrates me, we kind of talked on it a little bit, but we've got to do better as a church. Stop rushing people to the marriage altar.
Ooh.
Like, let single people be single and let dating people date. Because a lot of times it's like, oh, I like him. Oh, I like her. Y'all need to get married.
We ain't getting no young.
And they haven't gone through the process at all. Like I tell people all the time, me and Gina talk like a whole year before we even saw each other, which I don't suggest. But my point is, like, take your time. Because us rushing is leading to a lot of people that's not ready for marriage, not ready for the commitment. And a lot of times we do it because the people that are in power are encouraging us, and we want to please them. We want to do what's liking to our pastors and our deacons and everybody else. And it's really messing people up. Like, let people take their time. I'm begging.
Absolutely. And I think we need to encourage folks, before you actually get married, get some counseling.
Yeah.
I ain't never been married, so I haven't been through it personally. From what I've seen, marriage counseling will either absolutely strengthen your union before you tie the knot, or make you reconsider, is this something I actually want to do? And I think there's a lot of people that need to go. There's no bad in that. If it strengthens your union, then that's great, because you're going to need something to hold you together when things get hard. If it makes you reconsider, then that's probably even better, because now you're not about to go mess yourself up thinking you're doing something that everybody says is just the right thing, the good thing to do.
No, totally. We did premarital counseling for like 6 months before we got married. And when I say the benefits of that is, I can't even tell you guys. Like, I know I love you. I know I love God. You know you love me. You know you love God. But between that is a lot of stuff that needs to be navigated. And I can't even tell you how important that is. But when you're rushing people to the altar, they don't have time to find out what's wrong, what needs to be changed, what needs to be addressed. And now we're married, we have this commitment, and we have issues between it. And it's like, well, you guys love each other, you love God, it should be enough. And it's like, it's not. Like, let people date, let people figure this out.
What I think people need to realize is, because you got married in a week, that's not supposed to be everybody's.
Man, and you know what? Our parents come from that. That's what I'm saying.
I don't want to say no names, but and let me preface by saying this: if you have the right mentality about going into marriage, and then of course being God-centered, you can make it through it, even without the counsel. Because we have examples running around us.
Yeah.
But of course, you're gonna save yourself a lot of heartache and a lot of time. By putting forth that effort initially, or setting forth the groundworks of, like, this is how the marriage is going to be. Like, those conversations need to be had. And one thing that I did learn from my father heavily is, now my father and mother were ones that did get married fairly quickly, but he did tell me, he's like, well, we had a good conversation about, as much things as we can about, okay, the groundworks of the marriage, like, and if this happens, what are we gonna do? If this like, that was some form of communication initially to kind of springboard the marriage into. So although we probably had maybe 1 or 2 counseling sessions before we got married. Now, granted, me and my wife had been in a relationship for a while, and we were young, so we're young going into, and so a lot of these things were worked through, but there was definitely more that probably needed to been had before that first year.
And you can attest.
And God willing, we made it through.
Hey,
but
I want to hear about some of that, by the way.
But you can attest to this. Like, the person you marry is not the person that you're married to today.
No.
People change, and like we need to know how to change. And another issue I have is, like, single ministry is all about becoming a husband and becoming a wife. But, like, where's the ministry for single people?
Exactly.
Because people gonna be single. Like, let's learn how to live our single life. But anyway,
did you go to the same church as your wife?
Yeah.
And okay, how did your church deal with you guys as a couple?
Oh goodness.
It
was a little rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's story time now.
So I mean, initially, and we can get into it.
We can get into it.
Well, I'm looking at her direction. We'll get into it slightly. But there was a few things contentiously, but I will say the best thing is I was already integrated with her family before I even knew she was my wife. So the transition to going from courting into being married and everything, and then families meshing, everything was very I was blessed to have that. was very easy because they knew who I was. I knew who they were. Their family knew who I was. We grew up together. It was that kind of movement. As far as how it was received by the church, there was people that were opinionated about things, but the people's opinions that mattered, we were, because what I want people to know is that church people still need to get saved. A lot of church people are still not saved, okay? So when you go to church, don't expect everybody to be saved, okay? So they're going to have opinions about certain things, and you have to, let that go by the wayside and realize what it is that you're doing, make sure you're centered. But yeah, not to get into too much, but it wasn't fully received by all. But of course now, it's I think it's irrefutable now.
So you wasn't rushed?
So we were definitely rushed. Yeah, of course. We were definitely rushed. And I think even in our, we currently don't have children yet. We're, they're rushed in that, y'all gonna pump us against us. And I believe that every time we decided to plan and we centered our plans around, okay, what are we gonna do? And it's always worked out in our favor. Yeah. God's always blessed. So we're kind of away from the hope over opinionation of okay, how are we gonna walk out our marriage? No, I love y'all church folks, but this is what the decision we're gonna make, and it's worked out in our favor every time.
Very interesting.
Bless the Lord.
What about you? So I know that you and your wife, y'all was distant, but with the counsel that you received, did they rush you to get married to her?
No, and as you know, my relationship is very unconventional. Me and my wife were in 2 different states until about a month before we got married. Mm-hmm. But no, thankfully I was never rushed. Actually, if anything, it was the opposite, because it was you're not ready. You gotta do X, Y, Z, B, and T. You know what I'm saying? There was a lot for me. So thankfully I wasn't, but it was just because of my situation. I had never lived alone prior to getting married. So I wasn't ready. There was a lot that I needed to do. But I had a relationship prior to Gina where I was definitely rushed, where people was when you gonna get married, and blah, blah. And I'm oh, thank God we didn't get married. Could you imagine? I could tell you a lot, you know what I'm saying? Right? So it's yeah, that rush thing happens.
Wow.
And I think that's why you see so many marriages fail, because
that influence,
it rushed.
that rushed influence.
And the thing about it is once again, you're young, you're impressionable, and these people matter. Yes. Their opinion matters to you. Mm-hmm. So you start to think maybe we do need to speed it up, Mm-hmm. But God knows what's better timing for
me. That's tough, man.
Yeah, and I've seen all too many examples around us. I can definitely say for me and my wife, as far as marriages within our friend group or our church friend group, mm-hmm. to where we've seen things, unfortunately fall by the wayside, or marriages come apart, and it's just we're okay, we want to last. I don't want to get married again. I want to marry one woman, and that's it.
That's it.
We tease each other all the time. When you go, I'm going, because I'm not thinking about I'm not trying to think about going with somebody that.
So God, you're getting a 2-for-1 package.
This is a package deal. We go together. But it's I think it's just hugely important to be aware of that. Although you see great examples and you see some examples, you glean from the things that you can take, and then push away those things that are not going to apply to you, and then also make sure you're in constant communication with your significant other, because people get into your significant other's ear, and it can mess things up, and so you need to understand where the root of that is coming from and how you can build apart from those opinions. Yeah, because
definitely. My parents, both of them knew within a day that that's who they were supposed to marry. My mom was God said that's your husband, and it's they had those kind of experiences. I don't have that, and so I think people that come from that cloth, I'm not saying my parents, but they may have a hard time wondering what's taking y'all so long to figure it out. But I'm God didn't tell me that. That's what's taking me so long, So it's different. How long you gonna wait?
Until God says so.
My God, you know what I'm saying?
Until I hear audibly. I need the glowing cloud to come.
The dove, you know what I'm